Not sure how to measure your internal communications? Prove the worth of your internal communication strategy with Contact Monkey's email solution, built into Outlook and Gmail. With Contact Monkey, you will be able to track and analyze employee engagement from your inbox. Start measuring email opens, link clicks, location tracking, and various forms of employee feedback, such as Employee Net Promoter Score. To try Contact Monkey's free demo, visit www.contactmonkey.com/ICPro. I'm Sarah Jackson. Welcome to Internal Comms Pro, the podcast. This season, we're closing the gap. I've tracked down the experts that can help us as internal communicators close the gap from where we are now to where we need to be. We're connecting the dots to drive value and lead from the inside out.
We knew that when we made this call to go virtual first, a lot of our associates, weren't taking a day work from home. They didn't live in this world before. They didn't sign up to work in this virtual first workspace.
As a communications team, we challenge ourselves to represent the voice of the associate all day. That's like our number one job, and that's something that's always on our mind.
That's Rachel Maley and Emily Regenold, two internal comms professionals at Paycor who are at the helm of leading a big change for their employees. Now, Rachel has been engaged with the Internal Comms Pro Collective for some time. She was one of the first people who reached out and offered to help me with Zoom. Gosh, that seems like years ago now. I've been following her journey through COVID, and today she and her teammate Emily gives us their insights, learnings, and tips as Paycor has made the bold decision of going virtual first, a program that shifts all in-office employees to all remote permanently. They are sharing remote work tips you can replicate as we all head into 2021. This and much more on today's show.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Maley. I am a senior communication and employee experience strategist at Paycor.
I'm Emily Regenold. I'm also a senior communication strategist at Paycor.
Let's get into your stories. How did you fall into this amazing world of internal comms?
Yeah, for me, I actually started at Paycor 5 years ago. I just celebrated my 5th anniversary with Paycor. I started on our client service team, and I was an implementation analyst. So I actually helped our customers set up their payroll services and get them started with the software. And I saw this opportunity for a role in communications, which was really heavy on the tech side at the time. So focused on our internet, the digital signage, those types of things. And so it's really evolved since then, where we're in this seat that we are in today under our HR function. But my background's actually in early childhood education and educational technology. So that's sort of how I made the path to that tech space. And then I have evolved in the role ever since.
All right, Emily, tell me about you.
Yeah, so I'm from Cincinnati, but like almost any good person from Cincinnati, I decided I was way too cool for it after college. And I moved to New York City and pursued the dream that they say a million girls would die for. That's a little Devil Wears Prada fun for you. But I realized I was not one of those girls who was dying to work at a magazine. So right after college, I started working at InStyle. I was there for about a year. I saw people who had been in that role for 3 to 5 years and just thought, this is not the job that I want. So I actually spent most of my 20s working in digital marketing. I ended up at Groupon, which at the time was the fastest growing company ever. And then I've been back in Cincinnati for about 5 or 6 years, and really was in digital marketing until a little bit over a year and a half ago. I took the leap and came to Paycor, started focusing on the internal comm side, which I find super fulfilling, and it's been a great move for me.
Well, personally, I love that you came back home. And I love that we've got 3 hometown girls here that are talking about Paycor is right in our backyard. It just warms my heart that we're all here together and that we can, there's a sense of pride when I get to talk to kind of hometown heroes doing some really amazing things. So, all right, so let's get into it. I want to hear the story of Paycor with, the backdrop of COVID and the pandemic. Everyone has such a unique story when I talk to different internal communicators, and I find it fascinating. So before we kind of get into what the new strategy is, set this up a bit. Tell us what happened, particularly with Paycor when all this hit. What was the experience, and what were you both facing?
Yeah, our backstory really began in February when we started tracking coronavirus as a team. And at this time, it was just a small daily task force made up of myself, a few senior HR leaders, as well as our business continuity team. And we would just track where COVID was in the US as well as abroad. So actually the first city that Paycor had associates in that there was a case was Belgrade, Serbia. So we were just tracking, like, where is it? How is this going to affect us? And I think because we were so ahead of it at the time, it really gave us a lot of time to think about our opportunities and our roadblocks for when it did come into our backyard. So for example, a roadblock that we had at the time was that all of our customer service team was tied to phones, which didn't work in a remote environment, right? So we had all of these things that we started to think about a month before we ever went remote. And then as all of COVID happens, it just kind of happened quickly where it spread so fast. And we said, wow, I think tomorrow might be the day. And the ironic part of that for us was that it was the same day we wanted to announce that we were going remote because of COVID, that we had a company all hands meeting, which we only have twice a year. So while we had already made the decision to take our semi-annual meeting virtual instead of having it down at the Jack Casino like we normally would, we spent all day breaking our very small communications team up into two teams. So Rachel was on the team that was pivoting what the all company meeting would be about. And I was in a war room working on coronavirus communication strategy with all other folks from across the company, from client services to sales to IT and technology. And so what happened in Rachel's room is they shifted the entire semi-annual meeting to be about our COVID preparations and what we were doing, and that we were planning to announce that we were all going home, while I was in another room solving all of these strategies about, all right, we have all these folks who don't have laptops. How do we get them hooked up to our network with their home computers? Or what is our new sales strategy in this virtual environment? And so we were able to solve almost all of our problems. We had everyone hooked up to a computer, which so many only had desktops at the time. We also were able to troubleshoot our phone system, which we didn't think could be a virtual system, into a virtual system. So big shout out to our IT team and their partnership. So in mid-March, we went home thinking just like everyone else would be, it would be for 2 weeks. And we all know how this story goes 6+ months later. And as we started working in the remote environment, what we found, which was a surprise to us, was that we were extremely effective in a work from home environment. So as much as we had all of these roadblocks at the beginning, a month or two in, we said, wow, this is working really well. Like, we thought we had to take all of these customer service cases on the phone. We're actually handling them effectively via email. So at that time, we made the decision to transition our coronavirus response team into more of a virtual first team, and really started to imagine, what if this was a long-term thing for us? What would this look like? And we started to dream that up, and we surveyed our associates and found out that 85% of our associates wanted to work from home at least 50% of the time, up to 100% of the time. And so it was only a couple of months later that we announced, hey, Paycor is going virtual first. And we were transparent with our associates the entire time. You know, we said there are things we're figuring out along the way. But for us, it's really been pretty cool that we're still able to take care of our customers in such an effective way. And we just had our biggest company month ever in September, which is awesome. And we're figuring it out day by day, but I think we're really happy with the process so far.
Wow. And Rachel, I know in our prep call, you had talked about this idea of dividing and conquering. So to give our listeners a sense, give us, how big is Paycor? How big is your team? Literally, if it's just you and Emily, we want to know that. And how did you divide and conquer? Because you were talking about, you were taking some of the tech, and then Emily was taking other things. Give us kind of the breakdown of it.
Yeah, so Paycor is about 2,000 associates and we are nationwide. So Emily mentioned we have a location in Serbia, but we do span the United States as well. And so a bulk of our associates are in Cincinnati. And so we divided literally the two of us. We are two people to the internal communications team. And so we split the tasks. So Emily really focuses on a lot of the written communications, and then I'll support more so in like the tech or getting the meeting set up, the internet pieces. So that's typically how we divide and conquer, but there are many times where we're on the phone together, sometimes writing out the plan or whatever that might look like. So it just depends on the task that's at hand and how we decide to split.
Yeah, I think it's important though for our listeners as they're growing their team, or even if they are like a one person shop, that though, is it fair to say that you both kind of lean into what your strengths are or your interests are, and that's how you're dividing it? Because there's so much to internal comms. I mean, people need writers and designers and tech and writing and art, and when you move back and forth between all that stuff, it feels like productivity could even go down. So so is that how that fell?
Yeah, I would say Emily and I definitely both have different strengths. She's definitely a stronger writer than I am. I definitely have a passion for the tech space, which really shines through in our backgrounds. So we do definitely lean in on whenever there's a task that might, take one of those strengths over the other. But there's also been times where we've had to figure it out. And so I know there's times when I'm calling Emily and I like to joke and call her the word wizard. And I'm like, does this make sense? Or she'll be calling me and is like, how do you set up the breakout rooms again on Zoom? So it does depend on the situation. We've both had to help each other out, but also we will lean in on our strengths depending on what the task might be. And then I would say we also really leverage our network at Paycor. So there are people within the business that also have strengths where we'll be asking IT for some support or asking HR for some support. And so it's that saying of you work more with less. And I think we live that every day.
Yeah. I think though it's an important point to make though, again, as people are trying to think about their strategy for 2021 and how to structure their team, and also find other resources within the company so that they can even sort of makeshift kind of grow their internal comms team, although it might not be a formal member of the team. So that's important. All right, so let's get into it. Can you both talk about what is your high level virtual first remote work strategy, and within that, what is going really well and what are you struggling with? What's the looming challenges that you see that you might be having heading into the new year? What are you guys doing? Give us the inside scoop.
Yeah, so high level, Emily hit on it before, where we really started with a COVID response team. So it was a group of folks that was tracking coronavirus specifically, and then it really evolved into this return to work team. So it was the group that was making sure our office was ready to go when we did come back in. How are we making sure we're following the CDC guidelines and all the things that come with the new way that we are living right now. And then there's also been a side team that has evolved. We're calling it the Moments That Matter work group. And so we really looked at a lot of our survey responses and tried to pinpoint what are the things that matter to our Paycor associates. And so that group is really focusing on those things in a virtual setting. In addition to those things, we knew that when we made this call to go virtual first, a lot of our associates, weren't taking a day work from home. They didn't live in this world before. They didn't sign up to work in this virtual first workspace, right? So we also created an e-learning for all of our associates to complete, and we called that Paycor Performs. And so really within that e-learning, it was highlighting, Paycor's virtual first expectations from a company level. There was a segment for our people leaders, so anyone who has a direct report rolling up into them, and then what was our expectations for our associates. So we talked about things like setting up your workspace, both in your virtual desktop and in your room. How do you make sure that you find a space? It could be a little nook in your house. It could be a room that maybe you weren't using before. But how do you really set that up so that you know that you're going to work every day? We included some fun challenges throughout that e-learning because Paycor really prides themselves on having fun along the way. So we did highlight things like show us your workspace and then vote on your favorites. So we had some winners that showed us, what their virtual and working space looks like now to get some inspiration. We also had our executives create a Spotify playlist, which is really easy to do. You can just kind of collaborate on Spotify and then share it out. So now everyone has, a fun playlist that they can listen to as they're working with songs selected by our executives. And then the last piece with that is we, to really reinforce some of the tasks that we wanted people to do, we played virtual bingo. And so we created a card, and on our intranet, you could add your card once you had a bingo. So it was really asking our associates to take the action items, cross out that line when they did it, and then if they got a bingo, they were eligible for some prizes along the way.
This is so creative, and what I'm hearing is it's spoken like a true early childhood educator. and I think it's such a good tip to think about you being the teacher. This is your classroom, as if I had a bunch of kindergartners, because let's face it, I mean, employees, right? We are students. We still like to have fun and set up our desk, and we have great memories of like our favorite elementary school teacher. But what a great mind shift in thinking about that. Like if I was a teacher and this was my class, how would I inspire them and take care of them, but yet at the same time be teaching and moving them to get, the next homework assignment done? I love that. Do you think you're pulling into that piece
I
of
think a
your
little bit of
history?
it. Yeah. And also something that's interesting about where Emily and I sit in Paycor's organizational structure is we sit on the learning team at Paycor. So the purpose of that e-learning is that now when anyone new comes into Paycor, it's already set up and ready to go. So it wasn't just this thing that, we slapped together, one-time use. Maybe some people will take it, maybe they won't. We didn't require it because we know it's a busy time of year, but we're encouraging the participation, trying to make it fun, trying to get the learning out there. And really the intention is for anyone walking in the doors moving forward. So we have the ability to lean in on our learning team and use their skill set there for e-learnings and things like that. We also, we talked earlier about being a team of two. So we do outsource some help as well. So we really partnered with Tier 1 on this project, use some of their existing content to repurpose it for Paycor. And then we talked about the survey as well. So we really heard from the virtual first survey that went out that our associates were really missing that connection. So we were trying to find ways of how can you engage in a virtual world? One way was, hey, show us your workspace, right? We want to see kind of your space if you're willing to share it, get some inspiration, share it with one another. And the other thing with Tier 1 support is we created this coffee talk. So it creates this monthly random pairing where now you can have a coffee conversation or any drink of your choice, really, to get to know other people. And it's 25 minutes of your month one time. So every month you get a new person, as long as you want to stay opted in, or you can opt out at any time.
Staying connected with all your employees is more vital now than ever. Circle Broadcast is the only deskless solution that includes your email, intranet, Microsoft Teams, and employee mobile app. Now, Circle Broadcast helps you easily schedule or immediately send essential and crisis communications on your employees' preferred channels. Find out more at circle.com/mobile. That's CERKL.com/mobile. Now, in this next part, we get a peek into Emily and Rachel's surveying strategy and frequency. I love what you're about to hear because it shines light on how Emily and Rachel have grown in their internal comms journey and how they continue to be comfortable with the learning because, as you know, this new landscape is constantly shifting and changing. We must let go of perfection and embrace the learning process and all the emotions that come with that part of the journey. Again, we are going to put all their learnings in a guide and a template that you can use. Just visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes and click on this episode. Now let's jump back in.
Love that. I love the shout out to Tier 1. Again, another local, amazing Cincinnati company. Okay, so Emily and Rachel, you guys both have said something frequently that I want to ask. You've talked about you keep saying we learn from our associates. From this survey, we found out this 85%. how often are you surveying employees? How are you doing it? What are you using to get all this data?
We really focus on it quarterly. So we try and get the associates' feedback on a drumbeat. So with going virtual, we really wanted to get something out to see where people were at, make sure that we were checking in with them. But it also aligns with our quarterly connect sessions, which is our like performance reviews at Paycor. And so we're just always looking at that data. Paycor really prides themselves on listening to the associate's voice. And Emily, I think you were going to add something there.
Yeah, so we have heard the word survey fatigue at Paycor, and we are very diligent about when and how we survey, and we make sure that we only do that when it's going to be really impactful. So we put out a few different surveys this year. The first was back in April or May when we were trying to really test the waters and see how virtual first in the remote environment was going for everyone. The second was after we made that decision to go virtual first, and we decided, okay, we're now a virtual first company. Now what do you need from us? And we've had relatively high response rates on both of those surveys because they are things that are really important to our associates. And so as a communications team, we challenge ourselves to represent the voice of the associate all day. That's like our number one job, and that's something that's always on our mind. So in addition to just surveys, which can feel a little bit cold or, just formulaic, we'll say, we also this summer created an entirely new communications plan for our organization. So our fiscal year begins in July. And so for us, it was our FY21 communications plan. But knowing that that was about the time we decided we were going virtual first, we made a lot of changes to that accordingly. As we were building that communications plan, we had focus groups with all of the executives in our company, as well as all of their direct reports, as well as employee resource groups leaders and manager level associates. Well over 100 associates we had in focus groups, and we asked them what they needed from us as a communications organization. We asked them what's going well, where can we improve, what needs to change in virtual first. And it's really interesting to look at both that qualitative and quantitative data, looking at everything from FY20 to see, okay, what performed better when we were in the office and what performed better when we were at home. And then to listen to the feedback from people. And of course, there's always going to be varying feedback. Some people were saying, we love the fact that you're communicating more. We need this. Continue to give us that. And then we had other folks who said, you guys are communicating too much. We don't have time to read your emails. So it's all about striking that balance and trusting ourselves in this role that when we communicate, it's going to be something really important. So a couple examples of things that developed from that communications plan is that we used to have something that we call the Pulse once a month. And that was a live broadcast. It was a big deal. It took up our entire day, our entire video team's day. And it was just like an hour live news segment of everything that's going on at Paycor. When the pandemic hit and everyone was at home, we transitioned to doing an hour-long pulse once a month to a 10 to 20-minute pulse once a week. And what we learned from the communication feedback is that people like the pulse more frequently, but that we didn't always need it once a week. So now we found that balance about doing it 2, maybe 3 times a month if there's a lot going on. And we're continuing to serve that drumbeat that we're hearing our associates need from us.
I would also say a big
Go ahead.
piece of pivoting in the pulse and some of those communications is we're also hearing from folks that they want that bite-size information. So how do you like chunk it down and serve it out to folks in a more consumable, quick way? Because folks are on their computers all day long. Sometimes they don't necessarily want to watch another video or, skip their lunch to dive into something live. So now we're serving it out in a way that you can engage in it when it's right for your time.
Stay with us next week as we continue to talk to Rachel and Emily about Paycor's comms plan, how they are getting budget for the tools they need in 2021, and their best and worst ideas they tried when engaging a remote workforce. To get a copy of this episode's resource guide that highlights Paycor's virtual first tips, visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes and click on this episode.
Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, is produced by Super Awesome Media. Our theme music is Big Vision by Purple Planet Music. Don't forget to visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes for our free resource guides. Thank you for listening.